think that this standby motion, at least my gut reaction to it, my visceral reaction is that it confuses the issue. That's why I've been pushing for this resolution, that we have step by step, that we at least know what the process is going to be. And with every step that we're taking now, we're getting further and further away from that.
Well, I don't see this supplanting your resolution. It's not, we could have meetings and explain the process, given the resolution. This is a safeguard for the people in the town, the people who say, hey, if we go over the cap by $20,000, will the world come to an end?
No, but I understand
I mean,
you have to
so-
have
but we
some
need that.
resolution in place.
Yeah.
But to put it out at the beginning of the process, even as a standby, seems to me that you're skipping all of the steps.
I think we have a process coming up in K2, which is next on the agenda. I think we're viewing an imaginary parade of horribles. We're all over the place about what the people at the financial town meeting will or will not do. It's going to be at the end of the docket, which they will not say until they get there, because they pick up their docket at the table and you get enough time, and you start looking at the numbers, you never get down to the end of it. But even if they did, it's only an efficiency way of taking care of it if you need it. If you don't need it, whatever the people vote in the way of a budget is what will govern whether or not that is used or not. That's all. And the most efficient way to do it is to include it in the docket that's at the rear of the business.
I think the issue still comes down to this, the issue of, if you don't ask the state to exceed the cap, can you exceed the cap at a financial town meeting? I think that's, I think that's the basic, that is the basic issue. The budget committee proposes a budget that falls within the 4.5% cap. So there's no request made of this, of this state for relief from the tax cap, from the levy. And then the financial town meeting takes place and an appropriation exceeds the cap. What happens? Okay, because that's the situation, well, that's a likely scenario. And when you talk about a process, I totally agree with you, Mr. Lambert, that there should be a process. We should understand from step 1 through step 10, if it's a 10-step process, what it is. Because what's going to happen is, I'm not sure on the back end, when we get there, and if they don't, the residents of this town do not like what's being proposed by the budget committee, and they look at the numbers and say this won't work or that will work, and a vote's taken, and the vote at the financial town meeting exceeds the 4.5%, which is a likely scenario. What happens if we have not been there first? And I don't think we have an answer to that. But no, I mean, I'm looking at this. Well, wait, let's get to. I'm looking at this maximum levy. This is the standards and procedures for property tax cap, the levy cap for Rhode Island cities and towns. And when you read this and you get into section 306 and 307, 307 just says that once the city or town is notified that it may exceed the levy cap applicable to that year, the approval by at least 4/5 vote of the members of the governing body of the city or town, or a majority vote of electors in the case of financial town meeting communities, must be certified in order to. So that, I mean, when you're looking at this one, and this is what the state published in terms of 2007. So it does take. I mean, we got to take a vote to send it up. But then, supposedly with this, then it's the financial town meeting responsibility to make any decision. I mean, this was, I received this when we're talking about this and we're talking about the law, but then somebody published in 2007, the Department of Administration put a procedure forward. Now, I don't know who's been looking at this procedure, but this procedure says, following receipt and review, they're going to send this back. So, I'm not sure whether or not. What happens if we don't do the first step to even ask?
Can I just ask a
And
question?
I would think we're in violation of the statute. The statute, at least in that subsection, is clear. You have to get a certification from the Department of Revenue. And if you don't, it would seem to me that it's not for the town council to approve it, it's not for the financial town meeting.
But then, my problem, my problem with that, Jay, is this. A few years ago, when there was a mistake made on the levy, and it was a number mistake, and it was taken to Newport Court, and the judge there basically said, you appropriated the amount. If you can't raise it through the levy, raise it some other way. Have a big sale, have a car wash, do whatever you gotta do. That's how, so I'm just afraid that we could find ourselves in a position that we can't exceed the cap, but the appropriation's been made, and then the general fund has to be used to make the shortfall when it's already below the 3% that we're supposed to have in reserve over our annual budget. And I'm afraid to find ourselves in that position.
I just like, along the same lines, I'd like to ask the question that, and to maybe get a legal opinion, the solicitor's right there, gives his opinion many other times. What happens if we get to the town financial meeting? We vote on a school budget, and the people there vote more than what the budget committee recommends. And then we get to the DPW, and they vote a little more for the DPW. And then we get to the fire department, and give them a little more. But now we're at the cap. Do we just do away with the police department now, because we've reached the cap? Or can the people go over the cap, and what would happen if they did?
That's
That's
my
it.
point.
I'm asking a legal question
that's
from
the
the
question.
council.
But it's a question of process. This way, we requested permission, it's gotta go to the financial town meeting to be addressed. Nobody, I don't think will, hopefully nobody will mention that until they start putting the budget together.
But what if you didn't put this resolve on there?
Then
And you
can-
didn't get permission from the state?
Then you
Is
can
it
come
not
back to
still a government by the people and for the people? And so the people at the town financial meeting would be the ones that make the decision.
Yes,
Or
Bobby,
them.
yes, Bob, but here's the problem. The problem is, if the state law says you can only raise an amount 4.5% above last year's levy, and you exceed that in an appropriation, I think we're going to be found that, take it out of the general fund, take it somewhere else, but that's the amount of money that they're going to be entitled
Yeah, but see,
to.
I don't know that I really go along with that, Don, and I'll tell you why. The state doesn't abide by their own laws.
I
They
But
make
think
they
that-
make us abide by it.
I'd like to ask the
Right.
town solicitor a
Yeah.
question too. And that is that at the financial town meeting, and let's assume the budget committee comes in with everything's below 4.5. And it's not hard to do because it's really, you make so many cuts. But there it is. And the motion is made, I want to add $10,000 or $15,000, and you're over the cap. Isn't the next course to go to the General Assembly and say, listen, this is what has occurred, we want approval of our budget?
There are a variety of courses available after that. I don't know. We've talked about that. One is to go to the Superior Court for declaratory judgment. This is the budget approved by the financial town meeting, and it says this, and ask for that question for the court. Another solution might be to go to the Attorney General. Another solution, if you had in fact had the vote of the financial town meeting, would be to go to the Department of Revenue afterwards and ask them to certify it retroactively. There are a number of courses. I've just suggested this as one step we can control. That's why I have it. If you don't want it, don't have it. I just was trying to do one step less that we would have to argue about afterwards. I mean, I've given you my opinion consistently through the years that I do think the FDM has the ultimate authority to decide what to tax themselves on. And as to how you deal with the other state law issues afterwards, we would have to in fact deal with them afterwards. And I don't know what would ultimately be decided. I'm just trying to, as my job of protecting the town's interest, try to eliminate as many variables as possible. So this was one thing I thought, oh, in case we need this in the future, I should prepare it so we can have it ready. as one less thing to argue about.